There are women who are born to serve their country, and there are women who are born to devour it. Cilia Flores is one of the latter. Her resume looks like that of a respectable stateswoman. Lawyer, Deputy President of the National Assembly, Attorney General of the Republic, First Lady of Venezuela. An impeccable career on paper, the dream of any politician with ambition, but there is another resume, the one that does not appear in official biographies, the one written in the files of the Southern District of New York, the one that connects her to the Cartel of the Suns, the largest drug trafficking network in Latin America, the one that documents how she received hundreds of thousands of dollars to arrange meetings with drug traffickers, the one that links her name to $100,000 for each cocaine flight that took off from Venezuela, the one that records how her nephews were sentenced to 18 years in prison in a federal court for conspiring to traffic 800 kilos of cocaine. The lawyer who defended human rights became the First Lady of the narco-state, and this is her story. In the early hours of January 3, 2026, while U.S. helicopters descended over Caracas like black angels of justice, while Operation Absolute Determination knocked down the doors of Fuerte Tuna, while Nicolas Maduro was ripped from his presidential residence in pajamas, there was something else, something the headlines barely mentioned. The woman who was beside him, Cilia Flores, was captured that same night, handcuffed, humiliated, transported in the same helicopter as her husband to the USS Ioima, then to Guantanamo, finally to New York, to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, from First Lady to federal prisoner in less than 48 hours. But that is not the most disturbing part of this story. The most disturbing part is that nobody should be surprised. How is it possible? How did the lawyer who defended Hugo Chavez in 1992 end up accused by the Department of Justice of narco-terrorism conspiracy? How did the woman who presided over the National Assembly become a partner of the Suns? How did the human rights defender end up taking bribes to protect flights loaded with cocaine? How were her nephews convicted of drug trafficking in New York while she remained free in Caracas for 7 more years? The answer has to do with power, with revenge, with a marriage that was not romance but a criminal alliance, and with a mansion in Los Palos Grandes that was built while Venezuela was starving. Before we continue, I need to ask you for something. What you are about to hear connects the First Lady of Venezuela to international drug trafficking networks. These are not invented accusations. They are court files from the Federal Court for the Southern District of New York. They are testimonies from DEA agents. They are audio recordings in which her nephews talk about the Cartel of the Suns as if it were a family business. This story makes many governments uncomfortable. That is why the algorithm buries it. If you believe these truths deserve to come to light, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Your click is the only thing that can break the silence. To understand how Cilia Flores became the First Lady of the Cartel of the Suns, we have to start at the beginning. We have to go to Tinaquilo, Cojedes State, in 1956. We have to meet the little girl who one day would defend a coup plotter and end up marrying the successor of that coup plotter. The girl who built an impeccable political career while weaving, in the shadows, a corruption network that would turn Venezuela into the cocaine highway. Cilia de la Flores was born on October 15, 1956, in Tinaquilo, Cojedes State, a provincial town in central Venezuela, a humble family, the youngest of 6 siblings. Nothing in her origin indicated that one day she would become the most powerful woman in a destroyed country. At age 4, her family moved to Caracas. They grew up in Cadia and Boquerón, neighborhoods in the west of the capital, places where the highest aspiration was to get steady work, raise children without hunger, survive with dignity. But Cilia had other ambitions. She studied law at Universidad Santa Maria, a private institution. She graduated at 32, specialized in criminal law and labor law. She was not brilliant, but she was tenacious, meticulous, patient. In 1978, at age 22, she married Walter Ramon Gavidia Rodriguez, a university classmate linked to the union world and security. It was a middle-class marriage, modest aspirations. 3 children would arrive in the following years. Walter Jacob in 1978, Joser Daniel in 1988, Joswal Alexander in 1990. For 14 years, Cilia Flores lived the life expected of her. Wife, mother, lawyer, she defended human rights cases. She worked as a legal advisor for the Judicial Technical Police, a respectable but anonymous career. And then, February 4th, 1992 arrived. A group of military officers led by a lieutenant colonel named Hugo Rafael Chavez Frias attempted a coup d'etat against President Carlos Andrés Pérez. The coup failed. Chavez appeared on national television and spoke 2 words that electrified the country. Por ahora, for now. The coup plotters were sent to Yare prison, and Cilia Flores decided to defend them. Not for money, not for fame, but out of conviction. She believed Venezuela was rotten, that democracy had failed, that only a radical change could save the country. The coup soldiers represented that change. For 2 years, she visited Yari prison, met with Hugo Chavez, long conversations that went beyond the legal. They discussed politics, philosophy, strategy. She not only defended Chavez, she studied him, understood him, saw in him what others did not. The charisma that hypnotized, the ability to turn failure into legend, the instinct to transform a cell into a political platform. But there was another man in those meetings. A unionist 10 years younger than her, tall, mustached, clumsy with words, but loyal to the core. He served as the commander's escort. His name was Nicolas Maduro. Cilia noticed him, and in her calculating mind a plan began to form, one that would take decades to execute. In 1994, Chavez's team of lawyers achieved the impossible. President Rafael Caldera pardoned Chavez and the coup plotters. It was a spectacular legal victory, but it was much more than that. It was the birth of a movement. Chavez left prison, turned into a popular hero, and Cilia Flores had been there from day one, not as a spectator but as an architect. In 1993, while Chavez was still imprisoned, she founded the Bolivarian Circle for Human Rights. She joined the Bolivarian Revolutionary Movement 200. In 1997, she was one of the founders of the Fifth Republic movement, Hugo Chavez's first political party. Her marriage to Walter Gavidia ended in the early 1990s. Officially, it was never explained why, but those who knew them knew the truth. Cilia had found something more important than a husband. She had found power. And while Hugo Chavez toured Venezuela conquering hearts with his incendiary rhetoric, while Nicolas Maduro followed him like a faithful shadow, Cilia Flores built in silence, wove alliances, memorized names, identified who was loyal and who was dangerous, who could be useful, and who had to be eliminated. In 1998, Hugo Chavez won the presidency with 56% of the vote. It was the triumph of the Bolivarian Revolution, but it was also the triumph of Cilia Flores, because she had not defended a coup plotter out of idealism. She had defended him because she saw in him the perfect vehicle for her own ambition. The human rights lawyer was about to become a political operator. The defender of prisoners would become a builder of power. And the unionist who caught her eye in those meetings would, over time, become president of Venezuela. But that would come later. First, the system that would make it possible had to be built. In 2000, with Hugo Chavez consolidated in power, Cilia Flores was elected deputy to the National Assembly. It was no surprise. She had paid her dues. She had shown absolute loyalty. She had built a network that ranged from lawyers to military officers, from unionists to businessmen willing to finance the revolution. In 2005, she was re-elected, and in August 2006, when Nicolas Maduro left the presidency of the National Assembly to become foreign minister, Cilia took his place. She became the first woman to preside over the Venezuelan parliament. A historic achievement, a feminist victory, that's how they sold it. But the reality was different. Cilia Flores ran the National Assembly as if it were her personal fiefdom. They were years of monotone parliament. The opposition was marginal, almost decorative. Chavismo controlled everything, and within Chavismo, Cilia controlled the invisible strings. One of her first decisions was to ban press access to the chamber. Venezuelan democracy, already struggling to breathe, lost another lung. The measure would last until 2016, when the opposition temporarily won a majority in the chamber, but the scandal that defined her tenure came in 2008. William Diaz, president of the Union of Workers and Employees of the National Assembly, publicly denounced that Cilia had inflated the parliamentary payroll with at least 40 relatives, 40 cousins, nephews, in-laws. Her son, Walter Jacob, her mother, her cousin Numidia Flores, her daughter-in-law, Magali Gutierrez, the Assembly's security director, Vladimir Flores, another cousin, the husband of her daughter-in-law, Walter Gavidia, her ex-husband, 4 more relatives of the daughter-in-law, 6 relatives endorsed by her cousin. The full list totaled 47 people, 47 members of the Flores family paid by the state, while Venezuela began its long fall into misery. When the accusation became public, Cilia Flores' response left everyone stunned. She denied nothing, did not apologize, did not promise to investigate. My family came in here, and I feel very proud that they are my family, and I will defend them in this National Assembly as workers. Proud. It wasn't an excess of the system. It was the system. The Bolivarian Revolution had promised to end the oligarchy. What it did was replace it with a new one, an oligarchy of revolutionary surnames, an aristocracy of socialism that plundered with the flag of the homeland in one hand and Bolivar's Bible in the other. In 2007, Cilia participated in the founding of the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, the PSUV. The PSUV became the machine that controlled the Venezuelan parliament in an almost unanimous way during the 6 years she led it. Chavez adored her, called her Cilita. He trusted her more than many of his generals. He knew that while Maduro talked about salsa and drove buses, Cilia understood how power really worked. In February 2012, Hugo Chavez appointed her Attorney General of the Republic. It was the most important position in the Venezuelan judicial system after the Supreme Tribunal, the person in charge of defending the interests of the state, the guardian of legality. The irony was brutal. The woman who had just hired 47 relatives in parliament would now be the one in charge of pursuing corruption. She held the post for only 1 year, because in March 2013, Hugo Chavez died of cancer in Cuba, and everything changed. Nicolas Maduro, anointed by Chavez on his deathbed, won the presidential election by a minimal margin against Enrique Capriles. 50.6% to 49%. Venezuela was split exactly in half. Maduro needed to consolidate his power. He needed unbreakable loyalties. He needed someone who knew how to manage institutions, how to distribute posts, how to keep the revolutionary family united. He needed Cilia. On July 15, 2013, 4 months after taking power, Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores married. The ceremony was discreet, a small family event, officiated by Jorge Rodriguez, then mayor of Libertador municipality, and one of the men closest to Chavista power. Maduro later said he had spent 20 years insisting. He would say to her, "Let me think about it." She punished him with indifference. The truth was more calculated. Cilia knew power is consolidated with alliances, and marrying the president was the definitive alliance. But Maduro made it clear she would not be a traditional first lady. "Cilia will not be the first lady because that is a concept of the high aristocracy," he said to the cameras. "She will be the first combatant of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela." First combatant. It wasn't a decorative title. It was a declaration of war against the opposition, against imperialism, against anyone who threatened the Bolivarian project. And from that moment on, Cilia Flores disappeared from the public stage. She lowered her profile, left visible posts, no longer gave speeches, no longer presided over the assembly. But that did not mean she had lost power. Quite the opposite. She had learned the most important lesson of real power. Those who shout from balconies are replaceable. Those who operate in the shadows are indispensable. While Maduro gave 8-hour national broadcasts, Cilia controlled who entered the Supreme Tribunal of Justice. While Maduro danced salsa on television, she decided who ran the National Electoral Council. Her power was no longer in titles. It was in institutions, in loyalties, in knowing exactly who owed what to whom. And in 2015, that power would face its first real crisis, one that arrived in the most unexpected way, through her family. November 10th, 2015, Hotel Serve Botel, Port-au-Prince, Haiti. 2 young Venezuelans with diplomatic passports sit in the hotel restaurant. They travel in a private jet that took off from Terminal 4 of Simón Bolívar International Airport in Caracas, a terminal reserved for presidential use. They are there to close a deal. 800 kilos of cocaine, $20 million, the first shipment in a series of loads that would fly from Venezuela to Honduras and from there on to the United States. They are meeting people they believe are Mexican drug traffickers from the Sinaloa Cartel. They are undercover DEA agents. At 11:16 a.m. today, the agent goes to the bathroom and gives the signal. Haiti's anti-narcotics brigade bursts into the restaurant. The 2 Venezuelans are handcuffed and taken away. At 4 p.m., the DEA takes custody of them. Their names, Efraín Antonio Campo Flores and Frankie Francisco Flores de Freitas, Cilia Flores' nephews. The scandal exploded in Venezuela like a nuclear bomb. For weeks, Cilia had been campaigning for the parliamentary elections of December 2015. Chavismo knew it would lose for the first time in 17 years. It needed to mobilize the base. It needed money. It needed every possible support. And then her nephews were arrested for drug trafficking. The DEA had recordings, videos, audios, photographs of Efraín wearing plastic gloves, handling 1 kilo of cocaine during a meeting in Caracas. Chat records where they talked about drug shipments, contacts with the FARC, using the presidential hangar at the airport. In one recording, Efraín declared, "We're at war with the United States, with Colombia, with the opposition." In another, he promised the flights would not be detected because they would depart as if someone from our family were on the plane. The family, his family. The investigation revealed that the nephews had held multiple meetings with the undercover agents, 3 in Caracas, 2 in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, 1 in Haiti, all recorded, all documented. In one of those meetings in Caracas on October 25, 2015, the nephews took the supposed Mexican narcos to a strip club in the east of the city, Trio Gentlemen Club. They entertained them, promised multi-million-dollar business, sent 3 prostitutes to the Marriott Hotel as a gift to end the night. Everything was recorded. When they were arrested, Efrain told DEA agents that he was Nicolas Maduro's adopted stepson, that he had grown up in the president's house, that he had been raised by Cilia Flores. They did not have diplomatic immunity despite their passports. They were extradited immediately to New York, and when they searched Efrain's Casa de Campo mansion in the Dominican Republic, they found an additional 127 kilos of cocaine and 10 kilos of heroin, 79 kilos in the house, the rest on his yacht. Cilia Flores responded with fury. "It's a kidnapping by the DEA," she declared on television. "Political revenge. Everything will be clarified." Maduro remained silent for days. When he finally spoke, it was to denounce imperial attacks and ambushes, but the damage was already done. On November 18, 2016, a federal jury in Manhattan found the nephews guilty of conspiracy to traffic cocaine. On December 14, 2017, they were sentenced to 18 years in prison each, plus a $50,000 fine each. During the trial, a confidential DEA informant testified that Efrain had said, word for word, that the money was to finance Cilia Flores' electoral campaign, the 2015 campaign, the same campaign Chavismo lost badly in December, handing control of the National Assembly to the opposition for the first time in 17 years. The question nobody dared to ask out loud was obvious. Did Cilia know what her nephews were doing? How did two young men with no drug trafficking experience move 800 kilos of cocaine with access to the presidential hangar? Who gave them contacts with the FARC? Who guaranteed they could use diplomatic passports? Who promised them they were untouchable? The nephews never talked. They served their sentence in silence. In October 2022, they were released as part of a prisoner swap between the United States and Venezuela. They returned to Caracas as heroes of the regime, but Cilia Flores never visited them in prison even once in 7 years. The message was clear for anyone who wanted to read it. In Chavismo, family is sacred until they catch you. And if they catch you, you are alone. But the nephew's case was only the tip of the iceberg. The U.S. Department of Justice's indictment against Nicolas Maduro and Cilia Flores, presented to a grand jury in the Southern District of New York, revealed something much deeper. It wasn't just a corrupt family, it was a narco-state. Cilia Flores was not simply the president's wife. She was an active partner of the Cartel of the Suns. The 25-page court filing describes with surgical precision how the system worked. According to U.S. prosecutors, Cilia and Maduro participated in, perpetuated, and protected a culture of corruption in which powerful Venezuelan elites enriched themselves through drug trafficking. The profits flowed to corrupt civilian officials, military officers, and intelligence figures. And Cilia was at the center of that network. The most devastating allegation goes back to 2007. That year, Cilia Flores was president of the National Assembly, the first woman to hold the post, the symbol of the feminist Bolivarian Revolution. According to the Department of Justice, that same year she attended a meeting where she accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes. The purpose? To arrange a meeting between a large-scale drug trafficker and Nestor Reverol Torres, then director of Venezuela's National Anti-Drugs Office. The irony was obscene. The head of Venezuela's parliament connecting drug traffickers with the head of the country's anti-drug agency. According to the indictment, the trafficker agreed to pay Reverol Torres a monthly bribe, plus $100,000 for each flight carrying cocaine to guarantee safe passage of the load. Part of that money was later paid to Cilia Flores, $100,000 per flight. And according to DEA investigators, there were not few flights. Reverol Torres, incidentally, was charged in 2015 with narcotics-related offenses in the Western District of New York. He was never captured. He remains a fugitive. But Cilia's involvement went beyond bribes. The court filing documents that between 2004 and 2015, Cilia and Maduro worked together in cocaine trafficking. They reused loads that had already been seized by Venezuelan forces, cocaine confiscated in police operations that mysteriously returned to drug routes, with armed military escorts, with state protection. And when problems arose, the presidential couple did not negotiate. They ordered violence. According to the indictment, Maduro and Flores maintained their own groups of colectivos, armed state gangs, that functioned as a private paramilitary force. They facilitated and protected drug trafficking operations. And when someone owed them money or threatened the business, they ordered kidnappings, beatings, and murders, including the murder of a local drug boss in Caracas. The filing is specific. It does not speak of rumors. It speaks of direct orders, of decisions made from Miraflores Palace. The human rights defender had become an orderer of homicides. In September 2018, the U.S. Department of the Treasury formally sanctioned Cilia Flores, froze her assets, banned her entry into the country, and designated her as a key figure of the Cartel of the Suns. Maduro responded with fury on national television. Don't mess with Cilia. Don't mess with the family. Don't be a coward. Her only crime is being my wife. But the court files said something else. Her crime was not being Maduro's wife. Her crime was having built, over 2 decades, a corruption and drug trafficking network that turned Venezuela into the cocaine highway to the United States. The European Union sanctioned her. Canada sanctioned her. Switzerland froze her assets. Colombia banned her entry. Panama closed its doors. By 2020, Cilia Flores was an international pariah. She couldn't travel to any Western country. She couldn't move money in the global financial system. Her accounts were blocked in dozens of jurisdictions. But inside Venezuela, she remained untouchable because she controlled institutions, because she knew too much, because she had built her power not in speeches but in shadows. Forbes magazine called her the most powerful woman in Venezuela. It wasn't a compliment. It was recognition that the real power in Chavismo was never in Maduro. It was in the woman who operated from the shadows while he danced salsa on television. And that power had a cost paid in mansions built with drug money, in fortunes hidden in tax havens, in a family that grew rich while 8 million Venezuelans fled the country searching for food. But all that power, all that impunity, was built on something. The money that came in by the ton. And that money had to go somewhere. It had to turn into mansions, into luxury, into visible power. Welcome to the mansion. The dirtiest money is the money that doesn't exist, the money that never appears on a financial disclosure, the money hidden behind shell companies and 24-year-old front men. Cilia Flores mastered that art. In 2019, the outlet Armando.info revealed something extraordinary. Cilia Flores' 3 children had bought 14 houses in Cumbres de Curumo, one of the most exclusive areas of Caracas. Not one house, 14. An entire street for the family. The strategy was perfect, buying one by one through briefcase companies. Constructora MYR, Inversiones Glenduart, Corporación Petroglobal. Behind all of them appeared the same name, Mario Enrique Bonilla Vallera, a 24-year-old who had studied with Yoswal. But Bonilla was not a successful entrepreneur. He was a front man. In 2018, a federal court in Florida identified him as the man who laundered money for Cilia's children. Operation Money Flight, $100 million stolen from PDVSA. Bonilla was sentenced to 20 years for conspiracy to launder money. He is a fugitive, but his companies still own the houses. Real cost, between $500,000 and $1.5 million each. Official cost, symbolic payments in bolívares. The real money never appeared, and Cumbres de Curumo is right next to Fuerte Tuna, where Cilia and Maduro built their fortified residence. The whole family living in a fortified enclave. But there was more. May 2019. Jaime Bailey revealed that Cilia had fled to the Dominican Republic, Villa La Caracola, an $18 million mansion in Punta Cana. 9 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, infinity pool overlooking Jack Nicklaus's golf course, 3,000 metros of Caribbean luxury. The property was linked to Samark Lopez Bello and Tarek El Aissami. On May 12, 2019, Dominican police raided it. Maduro publicly denied it was theirs, but the connections were documented. And while Cilia built palaces, Venezuela lived hell. 2015 to 2020, the years of slow death. The minimum wage fell to $0 a month. Hospitals collapsed. 80% of the health system lost its operational capacity. 88% of essential medicines disappeared. Pregnant women brought their own delivery kit because hospitals had nothing. In 2016, infant mortality in San Cristobal jumped from 2.63% to 6.65% in 6 months. Babies died for lack of antibiotics, costing Ilausaos more than 22,000 doctors fled the country. Those who stayed earned less than $10 a month. They had to bring their own gloves, syringes, drinking water. People ate from the trash. Children suffered severe malnutrition. Elderly people died because they couldn't pay for insulin. The contrast is brutal. While a mother begged for antibiotics for her child, Cilia decorated her 12th house. While an old man died in a hospital corridor, Cilia's children signed another $1 million deed. Between 2006 and 2011, when Cilia presided over the assembly, she had 47 relatives on the parliamentary payroll. Her favorite nephew, Carlos Eric Malpica Flores, was appointed national treasurer. He created 16 companies in Panama, none in his own name, all through front men, a perfect spiderweb to launder money. In 2018, international sanctions arrived. The United States, the European Union, Canada, assets frozen, travel banned, but the money kept flowing. The question, where does the money come from? Official salary, $1,000 a month. Estimated fortune, hundreds of millions? The answer is obvious. It comes from the Cartel of the Suns, from her nephew's 800 kilo of cocaine, from the 100 million stolen from PDVSA, from every oil contract with bribes, from every drop of oil diverted from the Venezuelan people. Cilia Flores built an invisible financial empire, shell companies, front men, offshore accounts, the dirtiest money that exists, the money born from other people's misery, the money stolen while people die of hunger. But there was a day when everything collapsed, a day when armored doors didn't protect her, when 14 houses didn't serve as refuge, when the United States came for her. January 3rd, 2026, at 2 a.m., the sky over Caracas lit up with explosions. Operation Absolute Determination, months of planning, CIA, DEA, FBI, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. More than 150 aircraft. General Dan Kane explained it alongside Trump. The word integration is not enough to describe the complexity of this mission. The bombings began after 2. La Carlota Air Base, Charalave Air Base, Higuerote Airport. Installations in La Guaira. Surgical precision. But the real target was Fuerte Tiuna, the residence of Maduro and Cilia Flores. At 2:01, Black Hawk and Chinook MH-47 helicopters descended over the complex. The Night Stalkers, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, experts in high-risk missions. The United States executed a cyber operation. They cut power in Caracas, disabled communications, created a sensory blackout, controlled chaos. The helicopters took fire. The response was overwhelming force. Delta Force took control, secured the perimeter. 47 seconds. That was the time it took them to capture Maduro and Cilia Flores. They didn't have time to get dressed. Cilia came out in sleepwear. Maduro in a t-shirt and sweatpants. Handcuffed, escorted by masked soldiers. There was no resistance, no secret bunker. They surrendered. The transfer was immediate. USS Ioima, Guantanamo, New York, Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. Cilia was the first to step down from the armored vehicle, handcuffed, serious expression, watching Maduro descend with difficulty, complaining of pain in his feet, wearing flip-flops over white socks. Happy New Year, good night. Good night is what you say, Maduro managed to say, exhausted. Yes, good night, she replied, an almost domestic scene, a brutal contrast with the court case they faced. On January 5th, they appeared before the federal court for the Southern District of New York on charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy, conspiracy to import cocaine, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, the same charges that had hung over Cilia since 2020. The irony was perfect. Her nephew spent 9 years imprisoned in the United States, arrested in 2015 for 800 kilos of cocaine, sentenced to 18 years, swapped in 2022. But the message was clear: justice doesn't forget. Now Cilia was in the same city, the same court, the same accusations, from First Lady to inmate. For prosecutors, Cilia is not just Maduro's wife. She is a key piece of the Cartel of the Suns. Her name appears dozens of times in the indictment. She knows the money threads, the roots, the pacts. For the FBI, CIA, and DEA, Cilia Flores is the map of the narco-state. The questions: will she cooperate? Will she betray Diosdado, El Aissami, the generals? Will she reveal where the billions stolen are? The front men, the offshore accounts, the laundering routes? Or will she keep silent like her nephews? Christian Serpa, a former magistrate who fled to the United States, warned in 2019, Cilia directs and controls the magistrates of the TSJ. There is no separation of powers. Sentences are decided after consulting the presidency, and the person who communicated the decisions was Cilia. She knew everything, controlled everything. She was the invisible architect, and now that system had abandoned her. The woman who defended a coup plotter in 1992, who married a dictator in 2013, who oversaw the largest cartel on the continent, who built an invisible empire, who protected her family while millions died of hunger, today wears an orange jumpsuit in a Brooklyn cell. But her story reveals something much bigger. It reveals how a nation was kidnapped by criminal families, how the judiciary became a tool of drug trafficking, how the Bolivarian Revolution ended up being the most sophisticated cartel in the hemisphere. January 2026, Metropolitan Detention Center, Brooklyn. Cilia Flores awaits trial in the same jail where Luigi Mangione, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, Sean Diddy Combs are. The First Lady of the narco-state shares prison with the most wanted criminals in America. On January 5th, she appeared before Judge Alvin Hellerstein. When asked to confirm her identity, she answered in English, "I am the First Lady of Venezuela." Then in Spanish, with a broken voice, "Innocent, completely innocent." She had bandages on her forehead, visible bruises. Her lawyer, Mark Donnelly, reported that his client had suffered significant injuries. suspected broken ribs. The next hearing, March 17, 2026. The charges are devastating. Narco-terrorism conspiracy. Conspiracy to import cocaine. The same crimes that sent her nephews to 18 years in prison. If found guilty, she faces between 30 years and life in prison. The case could extend to 2027 or beyond. Motions, jurisdiction challenges, diplomatic immunity arguments. The transcript revealed something chilling. In the charges, Diosdado Cabello, Nicolas Maduro Guerra, Hector Rustenfor Guerrero Flores are mentioned. The indictment documents acts between 1999 and 2025, 26 years of criminal conspiracy. Cilia is at the center. Think of the full arc. 1992, a lawyer from Tinaculo defends a coup plotter in prison. She becomes his messenger, his strategist. 1997, she marries that coup plotter turned leader. It is not romance. It is an alliance. 2000 to 2013, she climbs positions, deputy, president of the assembly, attorney general. Her nephews learn the business. Her children build empires. 2013, Chavez dies. Cilia marries Maduro to keep control, to ensure the throne remains hers. 2015, her nephews fall, 800 kilowatts of cocaine. But Cilia remains free, protected by the system she helped build. 2020, the United States formally charges her $15 million reward, but she remains in Miraflores, controlling judges, appointing magistrates. 2026, a military operation rips her from Fuerte Tiuna in 47 seconds. From First Lady to federal prisoner. There are women who reach power to serve. There are women who reach power to accumulate. And there are women who turn power into a family criminal enterprise. Cilia Flores was one of the third. While she built 14 houses in Cumbres de Curumo, 8 million Venezuelans fled the country. While her family laundered $100 million from PDVSA, hospitals operated without medicine. While her nephews trafficked cocaine, children suffered severe malnutrition. The price of her ambition was paid by an entire country. The question, was it worth it, Cilia? Were the mansions, the trips, the invisible power worth it? Was it worth destroying a nation to enrich your family? Because today that empire is ashes. The 14 houses are empty. The accounts are frozen. The front men have fled. And she is in a Brooklyn cell awaiting a trial that could keep her locked up until her death. Cilia Flores was not only a dictator's wife. She was the silent architect of a narco-state. The lawyer who defended a president and married his successor. The woman who proved that true power is not displayed. It is exercised from the shadows until the shadows become a cell. If you made it this far, you already know who Cilia Flores is. You already know how a human rights defense lawyer became a supervisor of the Cartel of the Suns. You already know how a family kidnapped a nation. Now the question is, how many more like her are still free? Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, because in Venezuela, justice is only just beginning. The First Lady of the Cartel of the Suns today wears orange in Brooklyn, and Venezuela still waits for all the guilty to pay.